Hello everybody, thank you for tuning into You Matter podcast today. Today I have a very special guest. She's a very dear friend of mine, Lisa Lukings. Thank you so much for coming on today,
Thank you for inviting me. I'm excited.
I'm excited for you. You know, in life, sometimes we have these big awakenings. Sometimes it's a bit of a wind up to our awakening. And often I've noticed when somebody is awake, they want to stand on the rooftops and shout out to the world for others to wake up with them. But, you know, for me, I see that as a time of discovery. Mm-hmm. The initial awakening we discover there's something more to this life.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I agree.
Colors are brighter.
Yeah.
People are more interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And most importantly, what's within us becomes we come into focus to that indwelling spirit. Mm. And so with our awakening comes a time of intimacy. Mm-hmm. And this is where we sort of turn inward. We spend time there. We get to know ourselves. Lisa is a person who is awake, who has had that time of intimacy. Mm-hmm. And because of all the years, and we're talking many years, decades, of you going into that space mm-hmm. and becoming intimate with it, you've arrived at a time where it's a time of expression.
Yes.
And so these are sort of layers to our awakening. Mm-hmm. We discover, we become intimate, and then it's our time to express. Being that you're in your phase of expression, I wanted to ask you to come on and do this podcast with me.
Thank you. And you're very right. It is the time to use my voice and to express. It's the time for me to kind of keep it all under my wing, if you will, and hide my light. Has passed. Now I'm moving into that space of expression. A little scary, but
well, and I could see that. I can hear it. I can feel it from you, that you are in that phase. Mm-hmm. And you've arrived in the most legitimate way. You've arrived because you've done the work, that inner work.
You don't arrive unless you've done the work, and you have to do your own work. Nobody else can do that work for you.
That's right. And it's not just something that we know about and we read and then we have it. You have to go through your life and experience that. Yeah. That deeper sense of who and what we are. Mm-hmm. And then it's time to express. And I get excited when people awaken, and I have a quiet reverence for people that are in their phase of expression.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that it is exciting. And I am excited to be going into this next chapter of my awakening and of my spirituality. Mm-hmm. And it's just there's so much adventure out there and so much wonder yet to be explored, and things for me to do yet, and then hopefully impact and help other people, perhaps along their journeys and their awakenings.
Absolutely. Yeah. So Lisa is an intuitive being. She's been intuitive probably all your life.
Yeah, thinking back, I would say yes. As a young girl, I didn't understand it at that time. But I was definitely raised in a household that was my mother and my sisters and my father as well, my brother. We were all very intuitive in our own ways, in different ways, I would say. And then I was probably a young teenager before I realized that, okay, I am more intuitive than I perhaps gave myself credit to be. And then honestly, for a space of time, it scared me. And I was like, well, I don't want anything to do with that. And then I kind of went on and lived my life and had children and got married and then had children. And then there's that calling there was a calling on my heart. Okay, you need to revisit this and to explore this further and to grow in this, if you will. And then it just kind of, it took on a life of its own. I believe it was by divine alignment and all in divine right order, the way my life has unfolded in terms of my spirituality and the intuitiveness, is that a word? Intuitiveness of my life.
Yeah. And you are deeply intuitive. We've had some experiences with that. And you're a person who does a lot of healing work in the community. And you know, your ability to serve is second to none.
Thank you.
Your level of compassion is just inspiring.
Thank you.
So thank you for that work that you're doing.
And that's very important to me. When my brother-in-law passed away about 6.5 years ago, and I remember when Larry died, it was placed on my heart to extend. I remember it was like I heard a voice. I was driving to Tim Hortons, and I heard a voice say to me, Lisa, your mission now is to go forward and extend as much love and as much compassion as you can to other people in the world. And that can be in a small way, help holding the door for somebody or smiling at someone. Or it can be in other forms and avenues, such as healing, such as preparing meals for someone. Whatever it is, and because I am intuitive, I can sense generally what the other person needs and what I'm led to do. As long as I follow that with a pureness and the intention is right within my heart, then I believe that I'm doing the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you're a stellar example of doing just that.
Mm-hmm.
So today we've kind of went back and forth a little bit. We come up with the topic of chaos. And I couldn't think of a more appropriate topic right now because we're living in a time that things feel chaotic. And the peace that we so desperately need, we may not have immediate access to that because it sort of hinges on our ability to lean inward. Absolutely. To that same place that we become intimate with after we awaken. And so with all the chaos in the world, it's easy to look out and feel like helpless and hopeless.
Yes. Yeah.
Is there a time in your life when you felt like your life was in chaos or out of control? Or
Yep. To be honest, there have been more than one, like not just one time that I felt that way. And when I thought about that time of my life was when I was younger. I was probably in my late 20s, early 30s. And I remember thinking, when am I going to get off this endlessly long hamster wheel? It just felt like life was out of control. I was very stressed. I'd be driving home from work. I'd be crying. I was exhausted. And I remember thinking, how do I make this stop? I wanted to make it stop. But at that time, for whatever reason, I wasn't in a space where I was willing to stop and pause and figure out how to move myself out of that sense of chaos and stress. So yes, there has been more than one time where I did feel like that in my life. I don't feel that way so much anymore. But then again, I've taken very deliberate steps in my own journey to kind of create that sense of peace within my own life.
That's right. And at the time, by listening to what you're just saying, it doesn't feel like you maybe had all the tools you needed, or did you have them and not use them?
I think that they were there for me to access, and I wasn't willing at the time to slow down enough to access them. I didn't make the conscious decision to access those resources, those tools, my elders, people that could have perhaps guided me and directed me. And I just kept going and going and going and going until I kind of almost spun out of control, if you will. Yeah, but I think those resources were there at that time. Yeah.
And if we can maybe digress for a minute here, when we look at chaos in life, do you feel like it's something that we need to have in life? Do you think it has purpose?
That's an interesting question. I think that in order to have a great sense of peace or a great feeling of peace, we have to experience chaos. If you don't experience chaos or stress, then I wouldn't have been driven to find this sense of peace within myself to kind of balance that out. For myself, I tend to perform well if I'm under a low level amount of stress. I don't like that feeling of things being out of control. But we have to have a reason to get up in the morning, and I like to have schedule and routine. So I guess if I don't have that, I've got to have that purpose in my life every day, and the best way I can describe it is that low level of stress. But it has to be in balance. If our lives are so stressful and so chaotic that things become out of balance, then that can have huge ramifications physically, mentally, emotionally. We start carrying stress, we're grinding our teeth, we carry stress in our shoulders and our getting tension headaches and whatnot. So for me, I've got to keep it in balance.
Yeah, and I think, too, to add to what you're saying, I remember when I interviewed a friend of mine, Al Lozon, a very intelligent man, spent a tremendous amount of time looking inward. He was a professor at the University of Guelph, did consciousness studies. So it's a well-rounded character. He had said that, a certain level of chaos is necessary and once its limits have been reached, then order naturally ensues.
Yes, the pendulum swings back.
Yeah. And I think that's chaos can be a catalyst for our growth.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
Like you're saying, it's a reason. It's a reason to lean inward or reach out, in our life.
And for me, I'm going to interject, for me, that chaos in my life that I felt in my early 30s and those experiences of being on that treadmill, that drove me to find the sense of peace. So had I not experienced the chaos and the stress, I wouldn't be experiencing, maybe not necessarily the sense of peace and tranquility. Like you said, I wouldn't have been driven to find the peace and to take the steps and to do the work, to have that sense of feeling grounded and feeling peaceful every day, almost.
Sure, yeah. And I certainly don't think life is meant to be, we're not meant to be full on happy in every moment. And that's sort of a myth, or maybe a lie or a wishful thinking that life is going to be like that.
I think that perhaps is an unrealistic expectation. If we expect life to be happy every day and in every moment of every day, I think we're going to be disappointed, because that's not necessarily reality. But in terms of happiness, I think that we have a choice every day how we're going to go forward into the day. And for me, happiness to a large extent is a choice. And how I look at life and how I maneuver myself through every day and the challenges and whatnot. To a large extent, we choose to be happy.
That's right.
For me, anyway, yeah.
Yeah. And when I look at, what a lot of people may feel overwhelmed or about, or why they feel life is sometimes chaotic, I often think that we're overinformed.
Oh, yes. I agree.
Can you expand that for me?
I believe we're overinformed. I believe that it is, for me, too readily accessible. We're almost to the point of being bombarded with information. There's so much information, and it's social media and Facebook and news and radio. And I often wonder, what is the truth? I struggle to figure out in my mind, what is the truth? What is what I'm being told truthful? Is it control? Is it fear that this information that's being presented to me? And for myself, in terms of being overinformed, I have to shut it off. I have to turn off. I'm very, very conscious about the news that I watch, how much. It's very easy to go down that rabbit hole, if you will, and we can be drawn into that sense of despair and fear. and hopelessness. So for me, and I'm not denying what's happening in the world or the seriousness of the world situation right now, but for me, if I allow myself to get caught up in that and to live from that place of fear, it's not a place that I choose to live from. Mm-hmm. But I do believe that currently a lot of people are. Mm-hmm. And it when I talk to other people and I can sense their fear and their despair and their hopelessness, sometimes in my mind I'm thinking, it doesn't have to be that way. You don't necessarily have to choose to stay stuck in that, mm-hmm. if you will. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think if we stay over-informed, like the weather.
Yeah, there's always alerts now.
It's high alert.
Yeah.
But if we're over-informed to a point where we become fearful,
yes.
or worrisome,
yeah.
over issues that we won't work toward, mm-hmm. then it becomes a real hindrance for our ability to move forward.
That's right.
It stifles our growth in a way that it keeps us locked into this state of panic. Mm-hmm. And in a state of panic, you're surviving. You're not thriving at all. Yeah. We're not so deeply connected to the intellect that we can reach, mm-hmm. in our minds, mm-hmm. and we're not really connected to the silence within ourselves, where the true source of wisdom arises within.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah.
And so this too much information I think has become such a big problem, mm-hmm. for us. Yeah. And
I found for myself, and maybe I was just perhaps blind to it before, but when I really started to pay attention to that, the too much information, was during that period of the pandemic. Mm-hmm. There was so much information and so readily available, and so much conflicting information. And it was at that time that I really started to consciously pause and consider the information that I was taking in. Was it helping me? Was it detrimental? Was it taking my peace away from me? Mm-hmm. Was it giving me a sense of peace? And I do agree with you. We are overinformed, and everything there's this sense of urgency and breaking news and all these alerts, and then if you allow yourself, you just get caught up in that spiraling sense of despair, I guess, mm-hmm. for lack of a better word.
Absolutely.
Or fear. Mm-hmm.
And like I often will hear, if I present this topic to clients or friends, the common thing that people say is, I need to be informed. And I think, to what end?
Exactly.
And I immediately think, okay, information's great. Love information. Mm-hmm. Take in lots of it. However, what are you doing with that information?
Exactly.
And, does it serve a purpose?
Mm-hmm. And I think that for me, to an extent, I do have a need to be informed. But I also have to find the balance in that. Mm-hmm. And if it becomes out of balance for me, that's when I start to feel very ungrounded, very uneasy, very fearful. So to speak to what you said, to what end? When is too much information too much? Mm-hmm. And is the information that's being presented to us truthful? Mm-hmm. And then if I have all this information on a daily basis, what do I do with it? Does it change or impact my own personal daily life and my spiritual growth? Maybe it does, and maybe it doesn't. But it just seems to be so overwhelming, or it can be so overwhelming, mm-hmm. with the amount of information that we're given now.
So I see this as what we're talking about now is sort of something for people to think about. Mm-hmm. If you have a lot of chaos in your life, how much of that chaos is yours?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
How much of that chaos is actually happening, mm-hmm. immediately around you? Mm-hmm. And then how much of that
question.
chaos can you work toward bringing a solution to?
Mm-hmm.
What are you willing to bring a solution to?
Right.
And so then I think these are fundamental questions we ask ourselves when we're looking at the topic of, when I feel overwhelmed and the world is in chaos, how much of that information is actually useful to us?
Mm-hmm.
And so several times you've spoke about balance,
Mm-hmm.
and how do you stay grounded and feel that sense of balance in your life?
For me, initially it was a decision that I had to make. It was a conscious decision. I had to choose to find that balance and that sense of grounding. And when I thought about it, I was like, there are a lot of things I do every day to stay grounded or to have that sense of peace and balance in my life. So there's no one thing that I can say to you, this is what I do every day. There are several things that I do every day, and I'll explain that. All of that leads to a sense of peace and balance and grounding in my life. The first thing that I did, I started reading. I love to read. Mm-hmm. I found a lot of books very helpful. I like Louise L. Hay. Your books were helpful. Catherine Ponder. And I started reading these books and applying these principles. And I could start to feel a shift in my own energy and the way that I was looking at life and my own sense of peace within myself. I started to meditate. That was a big one for me. And my sister Cindy would say, just meditate. And I'd go into my bedroom and I'd lay on my bed and I'd try to shut my mind off. I had a heck of a time meditating. So I started guided meditations, which for me I found a lot more helpful. The meditations, the guided meditations, those became a place where I could go to quiet my mind, to kind of shut off the world around me and to reset, if you will, and then move forward in my day. I became very conscious and aware of my own self, what was in my mind, my own self-talk. Mm-hmm. I'm the only person that thinks in my head. So I became very aware and looked at, what am I thinking? What am I saying up there? Am I very critical of myself? Am I, am I applying a lot of guilt to myself? Am I very negative? And I really looked at that and started replacing that negative self-talk with a lot of positive affirmations. And it was almost a sense of pushing out the negative, if you will, mm-hmm. and replacing that with very positive affirmations and very positive thoughts. And when I say it, it can sound kind of hokey. Well, just change the way you think. But it's very powerful. And the words that we speak are very powerful. So I also looked at that. How was I speaking? What words was I choosing to speak forward? I try to be very careful with what I bring forward when I talk. I tend to think a lot about it and not put the negative spin on situations, if you will, or challenges, but to try to look at them differently in a more positive light, if you will. Mm-hmm. Excuse me. I became this one's a big one for me. I became very, very careful about who I spent time with. For me, that was essential that I choose to limit the amount of time that I spent with people that were taking my energy or drawing the energy out of me. And in a day or a week, there's always going to be, we don't always have control whom we might be able to share space with. But I chose not to consciously spend time with people on a consistent basis that were always taking my energy. Where you come away, we've all had it happen. You come away from a time spent with someone and you just feel kind of like a wet dishcloth. I was choosing and I was seeking people that were joyful, that were happy, that there was mutual give and take of energy, that there was no judgment, people that could accept me the way that I was, and that were like-minded, spiritual, uplifting people. It was more important to me that I found peaceful people, joyful people, maybe one or two, than be surrounded by many, many people that I couldn't feel that deeper connection with. So that became very important. I told you there was a lot of things.
And there is. You know, if we look at that, each one of these things you could unpack a great deal about. So you took time to study. You started, and in doing that, you started to put a narrative in your mind that you chose. You took time to meditate so that you were leaning into that silent place in you that peace resides in. And then you began to change the narrative and the dialogue in your inner and outer expression, the expression that we talk to ourselves and how we talk to others.
That's right. And sitting in silence was a huge thing for me. And I think it might have been you that I heard first say, sit in the silence and listen. And I remember thinking to myself, how do you sit in silence and listen? What am I listening for?
Yeah.
But I knew it was important, and I knew it was something that I had to do. And it was being presented to me more and more from different sources. Sit in the silence and listen. And then when I started to sit in the silence and listened, and initially when I first did that, I felt very guilty. I felt like I'm sitting here in silence and I'm not doing anything. I should be doing something. So it was very hard for me to kind of give that up. But to sit in that silence and listen and quiet your mind and go within, it can have such a tremendous feeling of peace. And you can, if you listen, so many answers and the wisdom and the guidance that you're looking for, or I was seeking in these moments and still do, was coming to me. And I say that to people often now, family, clients, sit in the silence and listen. What you're searching for, chances are very good you'll hear that in that silence.
So you've certainly given us a lot to think about in the topic of bringing more order into our lives and stepping back from the chaos. Do you have any concluding thoughts you want to share with us?
I wanted to say, for me, it became equally as important to sense within my body when I started to feel myself becoming ungrounded or losing my sense of peace. And I had to get good at that, what that felt like in my body, because I never want to slide back into that period of that chaos, that being on the treadmill. So I'm very good about recognizing, okay, I start to feel a little off here. I become a little bit more agitated or easily offended. It's very important that I stop and go back. Okay, Lisa, you need to stop here, pause, go meditate, go sit in the silence, to bring myself back to that sense of balance and peace. So I had to become equally as good at that, recognizing when I was becoming unbalanced, to bring myself back to that center again.
Yeah. And that's a practice.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
Everything that we've been talking about is a practice for us. And again, it's not something that we know about and then apply once and we got it.
No. It takes this particular journey for me of finding peace and that sense of being grounded. I was thinking about that on the way here. That has probably taken me a good 10 years of consistent practicing, learning more, searching, more practice, really, what's the word I'm after? Making that conscious decision to, okay, this is important in my day in my life every day.
That's right.
It deserves my attention, and I'm worthy of that sense of peace and well-being. That's not the word. Being grounded.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was, when I was thinking about this podcast before, in chaos, our self-worth often comes up, and it takes a hit.
I agree with you. When I was younger, when I think back to when I was younger, this didn't register in my mind when I was a younger woman, but I've thought about it since. At the time, I don't think I felt worthy of pausing and stopping and finding that sense of peace, taking the steps to find that sense of peace. I was a mother, I was a dental assistant, I was a wife, and I just had to keep going, or at least I thought so. But now I feel, Lisa, I am worthy. I am worthy of that energy and that time and that effort spent to have and maintain this sense of peace in my life. It's better for me and brings me a great amount of joy, and for those around me, my loved ones, my family.
So yet again, that's another thing when our sense of self-worth is on the decline, or if we notice that we're not being kind and caring and giving to ourselves first, it's something for us to lean into to help lessen the impact of the chaos that is out in the world. So.
You can't, as my husband Chris always says to me, you can't help others or whatever it is, heal, whatever the case might be, unless you yourself are healed or feel peaceful, whatever that might be. And I really thought about that when he said that to me, and it's true. How can I help someone else if my cup is empty, or if I haven't done my own internal work? There again, it's that sense of balance.
Yeah. And this speaks to the start of our conversation, where when we take time to become intimate with ourselves, we sort of discover all these things.
Yes, so. That's true.
Well, Lisa, thank you so much
for
coming out and taking the time to do this.
Thank you. You're welcome. I appreciate it. Hopefully you'll have me back.
Yeah, it was a pleasure and an honor to do it.
Thank you,
this podcast with you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, everybody. I hope you're all having a wonderful day. I can't help but think that there's got to be at least half a dozen things that you can pull out at this time with Lisa and I. Take care and be well.